Welcome to my channel, The Good Book Tales. In today's video, we are diving into one of the most surprising and powerful Bible stories. A story about justice, faith, and redemption that unfolds between two people whose names you might not expect to be connected in such a dramatic way. This is the story of Judah and Tamar. And trust me, it's not just an ancient story. It's a living lesson about courage, truth, and how God can bring hope out of the most complicated situations. Imagine this: a woman left with nothing but broken promises, facing shame and hopelessness. A powerful man with influence, yet blinded by pride and responsibility he fails to carry. And in the middle of betrayal, silence, and despair, something unexpected happens. A twist so daring and so bold that it not only changes their lives forever, but also becomes a turning point in the bigger story of the Bible itself. At first glance, Judah and Tamar seem like two ordinary names tucked away in the book of Genesis. Judah, one of the 12 sons of Jacob, is remembered as a leader among his brothers. His name would later be tied to the great kingdom of Israel, even to the royal line of King David, and eventually the lineage of Jesus himself. Tamar, on the other hand, is a woman from outside of Israel, a widow with no voice, no power, and no future, at least by the world's standards. Yet, what she does with courage and faith would set her apart as one of the most remarkable women in the Bible. But before we get ahead of ourselves, think about this. Have you ever felt overlooked, forgotten, or wronged by promises that were never kept? Tamar knows that pain deeply. She was promised justice. She was promised security. But what she received instead was silence and betrayal. On the other hand, Judah, a man who should have carried responsibility and honor, falls short. His actions create a gap, a dangerous gap where injustice grows. And in that space, Tamar makes a choice that shocks everyone. This is not just about scandal or surprise. This is about how God works through unexpected people and situations. It is about how faith, even in desperate circumstances, can move mountains. It is about how justice, though delayed, can still rise up in the end. The story of Judah and Tamar forces us to ask hard questions. What does it mean to stand up for truth? How does redemption come out of brokenness? And why would God choose this moment, this woman, and this family line to carry forward his promise of hope to the world? As we walk through this story together, you will see betrayal, courage, heartbreak, and redemption. You will feel the weight of Tamar's silence and the shock of her boldness. And you will see how Judah himself is confronted with the truth in a way that humbles him forever. The ending of this story will leave you speechless. But right now, we are just at the beginning. Because in the next part, Tamar will step into the shadows with a plan that no one could see coming. A plan that will change her destiny, expose Judah's failure, and open the door to one of the most powerful redemptive moments in the Bible. Stay with me, because the story of Judah and Tamar is about to unfold in a way you will never forget. Judah's story begins in the book of Genesis, where we see him not just as one of Jacob's sons, but as a man whose choices shape generations. He is the brother who once played a part in selling Joseph, his younger brother, into slavery. That moment already showed us something about his character. Someone torn between conscience and convenience. Someone who struggled to live up to responsibility. And it's from this background that his path eventually crosses with Tamar, a woman whose life would be bound up with his decisions in ways he could not have imagined. Tamar entered Judah's family through marriage. She was given as a wife to Er, Judah's firstborn son. But the story takes a tragic turn almost immediately. Er dies, leaving Tamar a widow with no children. According to the customs of the time, it was the duty of the family to ensure Tamar's future by giving her another husband from among the brothers so that her family line could continue and her honor could be preserved. This was not just a cultural rule, it was seen as justice, as a way to protect the vulnerable. Judah then gave Tamar to his second son, Onan. But Onan refused to fulfill his duty to Tamar. He acted selfishly, using the arrangement for his own gain while denying her the security and the children that were rightfully hers. And because of his unfaithfulness, his life, too, was cut short. For Tamar, this was more than just heartbreak. It was the second time her hope of building a family was shattered, leaving her once again without protection, without security, and with a future that looked like nothing but emptiness. By this point, Judah had one more son, Shelah, who was still young. According to custom, Tamar should have been promised to him when he came of age. But Judah began to fear. He had lost 2 sons already, and instead of looking inward, instead of seeing the failures in his family, he placed the blame on Tamar. Quietly, he began to pull away from his responsibility. He told Tamar to return to her father's house, to wait as a widow until Shelah was grown. It sounded like a promise, but deep down, Judah had no intention of keeping it. So Tamar returned home, waiting in silence, waiting in sorrow, waiting with the fragile hope that justice would come. But the days turned to months, the months to years, and no word came from Judah. Shelah grew older, yet Tamar remained forgotten, her future hanging in uncertainty. The promises she had been given had become nothing more than empty words. And here is where the tension rises. Tamar, once patient and quiet, begins to see the truth. She realizes that Judah will not keep his promise, that the justice she was owed would never come through waiting. Something inside her begins to stir, a determination that she will not be erased, that her voice will not remain silenced. And from that determination, a bold and dangerous plan starts to take shape, one that no one, not even Judah, could see coming. As the years passed, the gap between Judah's words and his actions became impossible to ignore. Tamar waited faithfully, holding on to the hope that Judah would keep his promise and give her to Shelah as a husband. But every season that slipped away made it clearer. Judah had chosen to forget her. To him, Tamar was out of sight, out of mind, a widow hidden in her father's house, her future erased by silence. This was not just personal betrayal, it was a violation of duty, a denial of the justice she deserved. Judah, meanwhile, carried on with his life. He lived with influence and authority, respected among his people, while Tamar's story lay in the shadows. He may have convinced himself that he was protecting his last son, but in truth, he was abandoning the woman who depended on him. This hidden conflict between what was owed and what was withheld grew heavier with every passing day. And though Tamar was quiet, her silence was not weakness. It was a waiting strength, a tension building toward something no one could predict. At the same time, Shelah himself grew older. He became a man, fully capable of taking Tamar as his wife. Yet Judah never made the arrangement. Tamar could see with her own eyes that the promise had been broken, that her future would never be secured through Judah's hand. This subplot of neglect, Judah protecting his own family name while sacrificing Tamar's life, deepened the injustice. And then another twist entered the story. Judah's own wife died, leaving him a widower. Grief touched him, but it also left him vulnerable, wandering in his decisions. Tamar, watching from the margins, saw both his weakness and his hypocrisy. And it was in that space, in the clash between betrayal and opportunity, that her plan began to grow bolder, sharper, and more dangerous. Something was about to break, and neither Tamar nor Judah would ever be the same again. The air was thick with unspoken tension as Tamar reached the breaking point. She had waited long enough, watched promises dissolve into nothing, and seen Judah live freely while she remained trapped in silence. Every glance at Shelah reminded her that justice had been withheld, that the duty owed to her had been ignored. The weight of this betrayal pressed on her heart, yet it also sharpened her resolve. She would not remain forgotten forever. Word soon spread that Judah was traveling to a nearby town after the season of shearing his sheep. For most, it was an ordinary moment in his life, but for Tamar, it was the turning point she had been waiting for. This was her chance, not just to confront the injustice, but to create an opportunity where none had been given. Her plan was daring, risky, and shrouded in secrecy, but it was also the only way to claim the justice that had been denied her. She disguised herself, carefully covering her true identity. No one would recognize the widow who had waited in silence for years. Instead, she positioned herself on the very path Judah would take. Every detail of this moment was charged with suspense. Judah, a man blind to his failings, walking straight into the heart of his own hidden conflict. Tamar, bold and unshaken, prepared to take control of her future in a way that would shock him completely. As Judah approached, unaware of who waited before him, the tension between betrayal and justice reached its height. Everything in the story built toward this single encounter, where pride, silence, and deception would collide. Tamar's heart pounded with anticipation, and Judah's fate moved closer to being exposed. The climax was moments away, and nothing could stop what was coming. Judah stepped closer, not realizing that the woman waiting by the roadside was Tamar herself. The disguise hid her face, but her courage burned beneath the veil. He saw her, but he did not see the widow he had abandoned, the promise he had broken, or the injustice he had created. Instead, he saw only a stranger, and in his grief and blindness, he approached her without hesitation. This was the moment Tamar had prepared for, the turning of the story where the silent victim became the bold actor. But Tamar's plan held more than a simple confrontation. She knew that Judah, powerful as he was, could easily deny her claim later. So she demanded something unusual, a pledge, proof of their encounter, something that could not be explained away. His staff, his seal, and the cord he carried. These were not ordinary items, but the very symbols of his identity, the marks of his authority. Without realizing it, Judah handed over the evidence that would one day expose him, placing his own honor in Tamar's hands. This was the twist no one expected. Judah believed he was in control, but in that single exchange, the balance of power shifted. Tamar, once powerless and silenced, now held the keys to his truth. The suspense deepened as she disappeared back into the shadows, carrying with her not only Judah's pledge, but also the weight of a destiny about to unfold. Time passed, and whispers began to spread. Tamar was found to be pregnant, and with that news came scandal. The widow who had waited quietly in her father's house was suddenly accused of disgrace. The people murmured, and Judah, unaware of the full truth, rose to condemn her. He, the very man who had failed her, now prepared to punish her. The stakes had never been higher. What Judah did not know was that the symbols of his authority, the staff, the seal, the cord, were waiting in Tamar's possession. The trap was closing, the truth ready to break open. But for now, the tension hung heavy. Tamar stood at the edge of exposure and destruction, while Judah marched toward a reckoning he could not see. The story moved closer to its climax, and the next moment would decide everything. The news of Tamar's pregnancy reached Judah quickly, and his reaction was swift and harsh. He had forgotten the promise he once made, forgotten his silence and neglect, and now he burned with anger at what he believed was Tamar's shame. In front of others, he spoke with the authority of a man ready to judge. He demanded that she be brought out and punished. The crowd murmured, ready to see justice carried out. But what they didn't know was that the true justice was about to turn back on Judah himself. As Tamar was brought before him, her eyes steady and calm, she carried no anger in her voice. She did not raise accusations or speak against Judah's betrayal. Instead, she revealed something that would change everything. In her hands were the staff, the seal, and the cord. Judah's very own symbols of identity, the pledge he had given when he failed to recognize her on the road. With quiet strength, Tamar held them up and said, "The man to whom these belong is the father of my child." The silence that followed was heavy and unshakable. Every eye turned to Judah, and the truth hung in the air like a weight too great to ignore. In that moment, Judah saw not just Tamar, but his own failings. His pride, his neglect, his broken promise, all of it stood exposed before everyone. The man who had condemned Tamar was now condemned by his own hand. And here came the twist no one expected. Instead of doubling down in anger or denial, Judah did something rare for a man of his time and position. He admitted the truth. With trembling words he said, "She is more righteous than I, for I did not give her to my son Shelah." The crowd gasped, because in that admission the story turned completely. Tamar, once voiceless and forgotten, was vindicated, and Judah himself was humbled before all. But the story didn't end there. Tamar would later give birth to twins, and in a surprising twist, one of them, Perez, would become a key ancestor in the line of King David, and eventually in the genealogy of Jesus. What began as betrayal and silence turned into redemption and legacy. The woman who once seemed forgotten became part of God's greatest story of hope. The climax had revealed the truth, resolved the injustice, and yet left a final twist that tied Tamar's courage and Judah's repentance into the very heart of biblical history. It was more than a personal story. It was a turning point for generations to come. In the aftermath of that powerful moment, the story of Judah and Tamar shifted from shame to redemption. Tamar, once seen as powerless, stood with dignity restored. She had faced injustice, silence, and betrayal, yet through courage and faith, she became part of something far greater than herself. Her name, which might have been forgotten in the shadows, was instead woven into the genealogy of Israel's greatest king, and ultimately into the line of the Messiah. What looked like tragedy became the very soil where God planted hope. For Judah, the turning point marked the beginning of change. His confession was more than an admission of guilt. It was the breaking of pride and the start of humility. Later in Genesis, when Judah stood before Joseph in Egypt, we see a different man, one willing to offer his own life for the sake of his family. That transformation began here, in his encounter with Tamar, when truth stripped away his excuses and forced him to see who he was. From his failure rose a deeper sense of responsibility, a new strength to lead with integrity. The subplot of Shelah faded into the background, but his absence was telling. He had grown to manhood, yet Judah's broken promise left him outside Tamar's story. In the end, it wasn't Shelah who carried on Judah's family line, but the twin sons born to Tamar, Perez and Zerah. Through Perez, the thread of God's promise continued, stretching across generations until it reached David and then Jesus. What seemed like a desperate act became a link in the divine chain of redemption. As we close this story, the lessons remain strong for us today. Judah and Tamar remind us that injustice can be confronted, that silence can be broken, and that God often works through the most unexpected people and circumstances. Tamar's courage shows the power of holding on to faith, even when the world forgets you. Judah's confession shows that redemption is possible, even for those who have failed deeply. Together, their story becomes a testimony that no brokenness is beyond God's ability to redeem. The tale of Judah and Tamar is more than just an ancient narrative. It is a reminder that justice, faith, and redemption still speak to us now. Out of betrayal came courage, out of silence came truth, and out of failure came a legacy of hope. And that is why this powerful Bible story continues to inspire hearts today.